to Dr. Brooke Istas. She wears many hats as a consultant, adult education mathematics expert, Cowley College math faculty, and adult education researcher. She is recognized internationally for her knowledge of adult mathematics and adult mathematics instruction. She has given several presentations in state, national, and international conferences on enhancing mathematical instruction, understanding higher level mathematical content, and teaching math at a distance. She is always willing to share what she has learned with others, and that is what she is doing with us today. Please welcome Dr. Brooke Istas.
Hello, everybody. Let me get my PowerPoint up and going here for us. So, hi, everyone. I'm so grateful to be here today. As my name is Dr. Brooke Istas. I am an adult numeracy researcher and teacher, but had you told me that when I was in high school, I would have thought you were crazy. Because first, I didn't like math in high school. And, sometimes I liked it. There were times I didn't like it. Sometimes I would cry about it. Sometimes I would ask my friends for help with it because it just was not an area that I enjoyed. I actually enjoyed reading a lot. And then let's talk about adult basic ed. What is that? No one really knows what that is, but just like so many of you, I fell into adult ed in 2005 as a part-time instructor for our local GED program. And I hope to share with you today this research that I did on adult basic ed math teachers in the United States to uncover their inspiring stories and about other educators like you. But I also would like to share my story because it is a huge part of the research, which I will do as we continue through. But today I'd like to ask you to just kind of listen to the story, my stories, the stories that you hear today, and just reflect on your own math journey. And the question that I have for you is, has there ever been a time that you felt like a hidden teacher making the impact behind the scenes? Another thing I would like to request is that hopefully you have your cell phone. I know this is kind of weird in a presentation handy because I have a lot of interactive slides that we can, get to. And this is the first one. So you can either use the QR code or you can go on the left side there. You can go to slido.com and enter that access code. But I'd like to hear, what is your role in your primary role in adult education? Are you a GED teacher? Do you teach ESL primarily? Do you work in administration? Just anything you can think of that you would like to share, because sharing these roles are so important with each other. Every one of us brings a unique story that influences how we teach math. So as you can see, things are popping up. Awesome. So all of us, and I like that cheerleader. That's awesome. And you can also share in the chat as well. You don't have to use the Slido for everything. So okay, we're kind of slowing down a little bit here. So keep your phones have around because we're definitely going to use them. Again, actually, the next slide, I'm going to ask you guys a question as well. So still coming in, still be recorded. So we have a great group of interesting people, and I'm sure all your stories are so interesting in how you support math learners. So here's my first question to you all. How many of you consider yourself math people or a math person? So this is really a yes or no. which I know it seems like a silly question to ask in a math institute, but sometimes we don't consider us math people. So as you can see, we're getting all kinds of different results here. And all of these polls are anonymous, I should say that, so feel free to. So everybody's math story is of value. Whether or not you see yourself as a math person, your journey holds power in the classroom. I can remember a time that I was talking to a student about learning mathematics and how much they hated it. And we were just doing a simple inventory type of activity so I could collect data. And I sent them home to inventory a drawer in their house. And then the next day after that, we did a math lesson. And then that student started to share with me every day. He said, "Miss Brooke, you've done something to me. Everywhere I go, all I see is math now." So I smile at that story. I think about it quite a bit because what does it really mean to be a math person? So my research came from, I knew I wanted to do it in adult ed because that's where my love and my heart is. A lot of people do not know what adult basic ed is, and I'm sure that that's not the first time you've heard that. But have you ever imagined a time that you were a math student and you dreaded going to math class, but then you were told that you could be a math person? And so now you stand in front of a class of adult learners and you break down barriers that you once faced. But how did you get there? Like, what was your story and why did it change? Or have you ever wondered about the hidden strengths and the journeys of people who struggle with math as students? And what about those struggles could make you as a teacher the best teacher in adult ed? So my journey kind of started with the Adult Numeracy Network. I should say that I love that organization. I met my mentor, Linda Ginsburg, there, and she encouraged me to pursue my PhD. So I went to school, not really knowing what a PhD was, and not realizing how I would be educating the masses about adult basic ed. So when it came to thinking about my research, I had always thought about in the math classroom about listening to stories, because students always want to tell you about their math journey or about where math went wrong for them. And so my research really started with this idea of talking to students. So my current study, though, went to look at educators because I'll speak about adult students, which you guys will truly understand. But the study that actually got published was on adult basic education math instructors. And I was seeking to uncover how their experiences in their math self-identity to shed light on understanding their perceptions, beliefs, and instructional practices as it is related to math. I wanted to understand these personal narratives. I really wanted to know and see if there were any commonalities that shape teaching and learning in adult ed. And so think about your journey as I'm speaking today and about your teaching style and thinking about how that journey has shaped you in your understanding of mathematics. So there is literature, not very much about adult learners. Most of it's international. So these are there were only 4 studies that I came across. And basically the studies all said the same thing, that everyone's math story does influence them. It influences their teaching, the way they see math, and how they go about feeling about learning math. Have you ever noticed that when you tell when you think about on your story, how that affects your teaching? So most of these research articles are about stories of math learners. Oops, I think I went backwards. I did go backwards. Sorry. There we go. So I started out with a pilot study with GED adult learners. And I really wanted to hear from their stories because when you're in the classroom, like I said, students are always willing to share what's going on in their life. And so I came up with some research questions that just spoke about the negative memories that students had, and how did they share those experiences, and how does it help them to understand where math is used in the world, and what were their perceived supports to help them navigate this. So this was a study I did in 2019. I started this in the summer of 2019. I originally was going to go into a math classroom here. I'm located in Kansas, but as you know, this was the beginning of the COVID era. So I had to kind of pivot my research. I did ask and apply for a grant from COABE, and I was given some money. This allowed me to hire a social media influencer, and so that influencer helped spread my survey across the Twitter sphere, and to link my survey where I was asking adult learners, had they ever attended a GED program, and had they graduated with their GED. So those were kind of the two big conditions. So they had to be over the age of 18. They had to complete the survey in English, and I had to clean the data because there are a lot of bots or artificial intelligence that also know how to fill out surveys. So originally I'd planned to do the survey and then reach out to adult learners to do interviews. I will tell you that I scheduled interviews so many times with learners that said that they would speak with me, but then when the time came, they wouldn't show up, which not a surprise. Those of us that work in adult ed, things happen in adult ed. People change their mind. And so I never really got to interview any adults students, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to sometime. I'm going to try to track down some. But from the survey itself, I did my analysis on the reasons that they left school, plans to enroll in additional math courses, their perceptions of their own math confidence, their earliest math memory, their proudest math memory, their worst math memory experience, and whether or not they suffered from math anxiety. So I had 225 respondents, which is pretty good, over a social media influencer. I did try to contact them all, like I said. So these are the findings that I found. That I did find that learners who shared their negative memories also perceived their math confidence to be low. They indicated that they didn't feel very knowledgeable about math in the classroom, and that these negative memories always involve some sort of failure, whether it was failing a class or failing an assignment. Other negative memories were associated with math anxiety. Students would tell me about crying. They would tell me about panic attacks or feeling very anxious. Adult learners said that there was a difference between the math that they did in school and the math that they do every day. And a lot of them said that they didn't understand why we even taught algebra because it wasn't used. Adult learners indicated that the teacher was the greatest support for them, and I that made me proud as a teacher. But like I said, unfortunately, I did not get to interview any of these learners, but I'm not gonna give up. I'm gonna definitely try to do that again. So I thought it'd be interesting for you guys to see quotes from one of my participant surveys. You can see these are some of the research questions I asked, and this is exactly how they responded. So considering them to be knowledgeable about math, why or why not? And you see that they perceive math to indicate intelligence. So they didn't feel very smart about being knowledgeable. They're not smart in doing things, but they were always willing to try, this particular interviewee or survey recipient. Do they like math? That was a big no, in all caps, just like you see it. And it says you study things that aren't really needed, and that's why people are failing. And of course, the least favorite part of math was failing. And when I asked them about why were they seeking their GED high school diploma, they said they needed it for the future. And that did they value learning math? I thought this was interesting, even though they don't like math, they did value learning math. They said it's sometimes is that I want to learn, but sometimes I feel it's not necessarily to put things in math that are not going to be used in everyday life somewhat. So that was interesting. I thought, wow, that's really, really interesting, the disconnect between what we're doing in the classroom and what they see in everyday life. So for my dissertation, they really wanted me to talk to people. So that's why I pivoted and talked to adult education teachers. So some of the work that is supported through research, this is the theoretical framework. This is like, if you think about it, this is what supports the research. So our lives are shaped by the ways we teach and think, and that this study helps us to use these influences more clearly. So there were correlations that we saw with math trauma and about not feeling positive about math. There's things out there about how math identity is ever changing and about how a math identity influences a teacher's beliefs, perceptions, and knowledge of the math. So the reason why I chose adult education, and we know this, is that information about adult education instructors is minimal. And also K-12 education suggests teachers' instructional practice may influence their experiences, beliefs, and perceptions of mathematical self-identity. But we don't know if that's always the case with adult education instructors. So we know a lot from K-12, but we know less about adult educators. And so the stories help fill this gap. And I chose to do stories because I find stories to be very interesting when listening to it. The world of adult basic ed is one where most people are unaware that even exist until they need those services. And as we know, there are more than 500,000 adults that have participated in a state administered ABE program. The educators for these programs come from all walks of life, but little is known about their educational experiences, their education, or certification. So my two research questions that came out of this were, what events in an adult basic ed math instructor's life contribute to their mathematical self-identity? And how do adult basic education math instructors' life histories contribute to and reveal their knowledge, perceptions, beliefs, practices, and about their math instruction? So the way that I went about looking at this, I chose what they call life history research. Now, life history research is typically done on what they call hidden or secret populations. It is something that they do in sociology, not so much in math research. So this was kind of new for me, and I was kind of walking blindly down this path, but it seemed to fit for me. Everything told me, because it's just an intimate way for me and who I'm talking to engage in this learned experiences. And people love to tell stories about their experiences and their understanding. And I assumed that the people I talked to told me their genuine truth. So there's no way to go back and validate what they said to be true or not true. And there could be some uh, inflation of their stories, but that's okay, because that's what makes a good story. So let's start with me. So part of my research, I had to do what's called a reflexive autoethnography, in which I shared my experiences. And when I was doing this research and typing it out, my own story, tears would be coming down my face. And I never realized how much trauma I carried within me about my own math journey. So my story is a part of the data. My autoethnography reflects on my like and dislike relationship in math. And I had to reflect back to my earliest memory, which was when I was in preschool. I remember I could count to 33. And I felt like that was a really high number, or maybe my mother acknowledged that that was a pretty high number. I think I was 3 or 4 at the time. And so I felt pretty confident about my math ability. Back then, we didn't have video games so much, but they had these little handheld things that you could buy. My mom bought me a Texas Instrument Little Professor, It's just this little handheld calculator thing that would spit math problems at me. And I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And I never realized how it was teaching me math fluency by doing that. But I enjoyed that game quite a bit until school started. And then when school started, um, I struggled with learning because I'm a slow processor, and it's taking me many years to be able to say that. But I am a slow processor when it comes to asking questions. And so I like to reflect and think deeply about what's being asked. And so I struggled a lot with upper level math and into college. Even in high school, clearly remember in high school a professor of mine writing that it was a Christmas miracle on one of my math papers because that was the first time that I had ever gotten a passing grade on an assignment. So it was a really difficult time, which is interesting that I teach math now. But, it just speaks to how the human nature that you overcome things, that you can work through those traumas. But it is important to share your story. And so, as I mentioned, that I worked in adult basic ed for 10 years, I was also their curriculum coordinator. This led me to being a part of the U.S. Department of Education. I am the moderator for the Links Math and Numeracy Community of Practice. And then, of course, I met my A&N fellow friends and felt like I had a home there. And then, of course, Linda Ginsburg's influence on me for my math journey. So for my PhD. So all of these things helped me shape my story. And that's not everything about my story, but we don't have all day for that, for me to share everything with you. But, think about that uniqueness of your story as we kind of listen to some of my research. Now I have some videos in here. People have agreed to allow me to share my videos of our conversations. So I plan to do those with you today. So the way I went about data collection is I sent out a pre-survey just randomly to all my friends in the field of adult basic ed, including state directors. I think a few of you, if you were in a program, may have heard I did get some Minnesotians into my surveys. And so from there, I did the interviews, and then I did a post survey. But I also talked to my friends at the Adult Numeracy Network. And then everybody I interviewed, I would ask them, do you have a friend that would be willing to speak to me? And so I got a lot of friends because once someone realized that talking to me is really not that scary, people really wanted to share their stories with me. And I love that because I really enjoyed hearing their stories because we all have them. We all have ups and downs in math that shape who we are and how we teach and our self-identity. So just a little bit about the 38 people that I interviewed. So they had to have taught adult basic math in the last 18 months. They were primarily female. They were primarily white, as you can tell. And their age group, the biggest age group I spoke to was the 40 to 49. And then my survey, this is a post survey. So you'll see I don't have as many data points here. I only have 26, but that's okay. You can see that most of these had master's degrees. They were full-time. There were a few part-timers in there as well, but I was really shocked by the degree level here as well. So let's talk about what I found out from these stories. So for research question number 1, we have some themes that popped out. So positive math memories, of course, that speaks for itself. People that share their perspective about math, and it was always happy and they didn't have any twists or turns. I had a few that talked about math phobia. I had some that had negative performance outcomes. So they spoke about experiencing negative experiences throughout their math journey, whether it be failing. And then I had a couple that spoke about physical punishment. For the second research question, that was the one about instruction. kind of fit into these 4 categories. We had active learning strategies, algorithms and lecture, professional learning, and of course, caring. So thinking about how does your math background or identity shape who you are, we're going to listen to some of these findings that I have. So this is Pam. Pam's going to share with us her story.
It's one of the best subjects, just for the fact of it was something that I could figure out and know I was right, whereas, and I could be done.
So Pam shared about feeling confident about math. She liked the fact that you knew that your answer was your answer. A lot of these interviewees mentioned that they had been engineers or architects, and they teach now in adult ed. Things like, I'm a math nerd, or I love math. Math is my best subject. These stories mostly were about people who never struggled. They found math to be easy, and they had some type of major in college that was in math or a math related career. So they had a lot of experience with math, and it was always positive. This next group, we're going to hear from Rhonda. She did ask me to keep her image hidden, so we will just hear her comments. I had 7 people that expressed these sentiments.
No, and even now I tell the story to my students about how my anxiety began in first grade with Math Minute. And every morning we would have a sheet of 100 problems, and there would be 60 seconds on the clock. And then, you'd hear go, and you flip that sheet over, and you've got to answer as many of those problems correctly as you can. And I was doomed from day one and in first grade, because seriously, that was terrifying for me. I started my day every morning in elementary school at the height of anxiety.
So most of the participants here, they found math, they used words like anxiety or fear or not wanting going back to math class. They shared that this happened in primary school, and there were a lot of them that talked about timed assessments or mad minutes or just memorization or some type of procedure that they just felt like they would never get. You can see here, I have some quotes about the 6th grade was pretty much torture because they tried to block it out. That they've always had a lot of nervous and anxiety about math in particular. And some say, I still have anxiety, especially when it comes to calculations. Now, remember, these are current teachers in adult basic ed. They teach math to our learners. That's what even makes this more powerful for me. We have negative performance outcome. So we're going to hear Karen's story.
But my personal issue was having to study. Like, my first time I ever failed a class was geometry. And it was because I would not study the theorems and stuff, and that was the issue. So the teacher, I got a 55, first time ever got a 55 in math. And years later, you go back, and I think I ran into him in the street or something, and he said, the reason why I gave you a 55 because you had potential, and I knew you could do it.
So as you can tell, we're adult educators. I'll interview you in a car, in your office, wherever I can. So this participant here, she told me about how much she loves math, even though she had experienced this negative performance from a math teacher. They did talk about assessments, classes, assignments. Some of them were just subject matter. So you can see from the quotes there that pre-algebra was a disaster, that I lost all my math confidence. I ended up failing by 1 point, and I think that won't allow me to move forward. And then here you see I hated math. Math was the only subject that I ever failed. And geometry was the one that she failed, or he failed. Probably the most powerful story that you will hear today will be Candy's story, and it's a story about physical punishment. So let's listen to Candy.
Okay. All right. It's a funny story, but it's not a funny story. So I needed glasses at a very early age. I had very poor vision. And of course, you don't know when you're a little one,
Right.
And by third grade, I guess it was, it really came to light. I don't know whether my parents took me, you know, to the doctors, or it was just I was bumping into things. I don't know, but I needed glasses. And now you got to remember, I'm very old.
Oh.
And so back then, there weren't a lot of choices for little kids' glasses. And so mom bought me this, you know, really cute pair of cat's eyes that were just, you know, so for second grade, I just didn't wear them. You know, we had desks back then, and I shoved them, you know, mom sent me to school and I shoved them in the back of my desk. So third grade comes and there are my glasses in my desk, but I happened to sit in the back row. And it was a very, very small school. It was only 4 classes, 4 classrooms, 3 grades. And so all right, so anyway, so I'm in the back row and we're starting multiplication tables, and so the teacher is at the front of the row and she's holding up the cards for each child in each row. So she, you know, Johnny, you know, 2 times 2, okay, 4, next, comes to me, I can't see the cards. So it's like I think the attitude of, yeah, I don't really care anyway. So it was like I'd make up the problem and then make up an answer. And she'd look and she would march down the aisle to me, slap me across the face. Wow. And then walk back up. And of course, I had to sit down because I didn't get to play anymore, you know, with this wonderful game that she had. And so it was like, oh, math is bad because
So Candy's story is a powerful one. There were only 2 participants that mentioned some sort of physical punishment. The other story was about being hit with a ruler when trying to do multiplication facts and getting something wrong. So there's something about math facts that these instructors felt that they need to punish the learners when they did things that were wrong. And it's very powerful to me to imagine that time of their life and that they are math educators now. So have you ever shared your math story with your learners? So take a few minutes here and we'll have you all participate in this poll here. Kind of interesting to see. I'm glad to see that you do share your journey with your learners. Okay, so looks to be like mostly you guys do. That's awesome. I bet you didn't realize how much research goes into thinking about how beneficial that is to your learners. We just intuitively feel like it's important to share our struggles so to inspire our students to continue in their math journey. So research question number 2 was, remember about how do these stories, how does your experiences reveal your knowledge, your perception, your beliefs, and how you teach math? We're going to hear 4 stories here from this question as well. So we will start with Rachel.
And within Cutie, I mean, I love Desmos, and I have written a lot of Desmos activities myself. I mean, I've my personal investment in the things that I've designed in Desmos and the way I've taken Desmos stuff and adapted it. And I'm a really good online math teacher now. I'm not an online math teacher anymore. So, you know, and I think I could be very selective about it, but there's certainly some times when I want my students to be able to.
So in the chat, I see that you guys are talking about your stories and remembering memories. And so thank you for doing that. I appreciate hearing all the stories that you share with me. This particular group talked about how they found going to a PD, going to some sort of conference, helping them to realize that there is this conceptual understanding about math that we can tie to everyday events that made the math that they felt like a failure come to life. They talked about how they do interactive tasks, that they use hands-on material. They wanted to foster this confidence and make math fun. Some of them mentioned using buzzers, as you can tell. I try to make math fun as much as I can. We play games. I have buzzers. We go around. So I try to make it fun. I want to try to make math approachable. And that's what I heard a lot from these stories, because people that have struggled with math or had some type of phobia of math, these were some aha moments that have helped transform their belief in being a math learner.
Manipulate things the way that they can in Desmos, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to replicate that. We can go down to the computer lab.
Okay, sorry. Apparently I hit a button and it didn't finish her. But she does talk about being an online teacher and using Desmos as a way to kind of bring some of the more abstract math to life, which is great. Algorithms and lecture. Some instructors feel very comfortable in this area. We're going to hear from Tracy here.
The things you have to do is steps. It's just like anything else you do. You have to take the same, steps that you do to cook, the same steps that you do to put your car in gear and go. Like, it all takes steps that you have to remember. And I was like, but when you got a license, you have to do what? Take the test, but you have to learn the rules of the road, and prove that you knew the rules of the road. And I was like, that's the same approach. You can show people how to write. Yeah. But that don't mean they're gonna be good writers. But with math, you can teach them the rules and you can teach them the steps, and then they
So the participants in this group, they had not experienced any struggle in their math journey, which I thought was unique. They saw math as procedural or process. They talked about rules and about, inverting the back number when you're multiplying fractions. They talked about using YouTube Khan Academy, things like that. They talked about, they couldn't believe that a lot of the students that they see don't know their math facts. And so it took them back to a time on how they learned theirs. And so they spend time trying to learn math facts in the classroom. And so just thinking about how their own journey, their personal journey of non-struggle has influenced them in the classroom was very interesting, how strong of influence that process was. Professional learning, you're going to hear from Zena now. Zena shares about a mentor relationship.
My first PD, my first genuine PD that's where she hooked me. She just went, come here. An amazing story herself. Experiences in Brooklyn. She lived there for a while. She went to Brooklyn College for some courses. So we had all of these connections. I was taking either not a transitions course, an algebra course through World Ed or one of those providers. Sure. Not my local PD system, but World Ed or one of those. And there was a practical experience to this course. And that's really, she's been my mentor ever since. We bonded over our experiences, and that's where I fell in love with math.
So participants that spoke about this told me stories about improving their professional development, whether that be through mentoring or some peer group. They talked about even teaching themselves the math that they used to be scared of. As you can see, it says, I tell you, when I found this PD, I thought I had found heaven. And then they were like, isn't that crazy? So they taught themselves all the math that they had forgotten. Then you see another one there, my last one, it says, and that's when I went to a workshop on problem-based learning. And I learned about really hands-on teaching, and you're not the sage on the stage. So these were professionals that had told me that they had experienced math anxiety or phobia of math, and that they were now falling in love with math through these different avenues, through these professional developments or mentor groups with each other. And then my last participant here is Dan. Dan's going to speak about caring about his students.
Math a lot. I'm good at math and I like it, but I really like people more. And I'm more interested in making sure that you have the opportunity to use your talents and gifts to become a dental hygienist, to become a LPN, to become lots of things. And I want to make sure that the doors are open for you to be able to get through your math requirements. So I don't need you to love math when you're done with my class. That's not my goal. My goal is that you've developed some sense of confidence, some sense of your own ability to tackle mathematics, but I don't need you to love algebra. And I'm not going to spend any time trying to convince you that algebra is really important to your everyday life. I mean, if you
Yeah, so Dan was very powerful because he came from a group that mostly were people that hadn't experienced struggle with math. I mean, there were a few that were in this group that had struggled, but this group was largely made up of people that didn't struggle. And so it was amazing to me to hear how much that they talked about the adult learner and about their experiences and how they felt. You can see from these powerful quotes that I have here that I'm glad that I failed out of college because it gave me a perspective that not everyone sees math the same way. So it was their aha moment. Also, math in adult education is more about the relationship, much more about the relationship. So all these people talked about making that connection with their learner, finding out what their learner was important to them, and then helping them to tie the math learning to those things that are of interest to the student. So, and we had 10 people talk about caring, which was something that in K-12, believe it or not, a lot of their research, they talk about social emotional learning, but they don't talk about the same compassion, empathy that we have in adult ed. So how does your math story influence? Think about one aspect of your teaching. You can use short words or phrases, or you can use my themes if you want: active learning, caring, professional learning, algorithms. But think about your own math story, and if you could sum it up in a short word or a phrase, how does it influence your teaching? So as you can see, this little word cloud is popping up. I see some people in chat have posted circular learning. Zed, the comment about my social emotional learning, but not compassion. It's a different level with young students, K-12 learners. They don't have the background and the experience of life. And that's part of, I think, the reason why the research doesn't delve down into that, because a lot of the K-12 learners don't have quite the life experience background that ours does. So it looks like you guys, so the words get bigger if you use the same one. So I see patience being bigger and learning, perseverance, disability, feeling stupid. Yes, these are great. Being a role model. Yep, I can do this. So thank you guys for participating in that. These are great takeaways about your stories. Trying to relax. Yeah, understanding the why. Oh, so many good things being popped up here. So this idea of our self-identity. Oh, and Patricia shared about her learning disability, thought that she was stupid until I learned to overcome. Yes, good. Telling learners I use great. These are great things you guys are sharing with me in chat. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, get my, oh. All right, so some of my themes, that I talked about: positive math experience, phobia, negative performance outcome, physical punishment. Some things that come from the research that talk about that ours also validated that. My research validated that to have a strong math identity, you need to view math more positively. Loving math and feeling confident in math is important. When you have these positive memories, that you have a strong math identity is tied to a strong engagement, motivation, achievement. If there is some sort of phobia, we know that that can be linked to math anxiety. There's a correlation between lower math knowledge, understanding, and motivation if you are scared of it. That math can actually deliver psychological and physical experiences to students. This is research that's out there that wasn't really just for adult education, but my research has helped validate that those also are experienced by adult basic ed teachers. I hope someday to continue and talk to learners. So negative performance outcome, we're also about that feeling of failure, that decline in the math classrooms that are connected to negative feelings about math. And then once again, about the physical punishment, that the psychological and physical pain experience create gaps, huge gaps in your learning. Some of you guys, I think in chat, mentioned that one of the participants remembered the percentage. Math is so powerful in that aspect. And my next research is going to be looking at deeper trauma in math, about remembering things like that, the details, things that I was wearing that day. People can really paint a deep picture if the trauma was severe. Active learning, here we talk about teachers' beliefs contribute to their learning and their teaching practices. We know this in K-12. We also know this in adult ed, that a student's identity differs from a teacher's identity. And this was big. So identity is a fluid concept. We're always changing who we are based off our life experiences. So when we see ourselves as a student, we view things differently than when we view ourselves as the teacher. And so a lot of the participants that said that they struggled with math, they actually changed their mindset when they had to become the teacher. No longer could they afford to be scared to teach math. They had to create a way that made sense for them. And in doing so, that influenced them to have more of that positive outlook on mathematics. Lecture and algorithms. So teachers' beliefs about procedure-driven do influence the way they were taught. So if a teacher believes that procedure is the best way to learn, then that's the way they're going to teach. They see math viewed in steps, which sometimes those steps can be less engaging to learners depending on that learner that you have in your classroom. Professional learning communities are so important. They help change the way that teachers want to learn and improve on their teaching. It's a way of motivating people to change what they believe, and that teachers learn to explore math and know why it works. It's that conceptual understanding that came up, I think, in some of those word clouds. And then, of course, caring. Caring is a huge aspect of helping students, was more important than the content. Learning is supportive, relatable, encouraging, honest, communal. A lot of you guys, when you talked about patience, telling students to be patient, being patient with your students, all those are great supportive ways of mathematical instructional practices. So I did have some recommendations that came out from my research, and my research is available online. It's it's a lot of pages. I'm going to condense it down though to make it more digestible, because I do feel that these recommendations are going to be so important to our field. Is that educators need to understand their different math identities and their own beliefs personally when they come into a classroom, and how those influence their instructional practices. That all educators need to have skills to support learners as they work through math phobias. Math phobia, math trauma, those are all big things. We need to be able to help students kind of work through those. And so educators need to be equipped with those strategies. Timed assessments and mad minutes, they can be used, but then there's a caution. This is This is an area of math research that kind of is one of those that some people think it's great and some people don't, but it can be great if it's implemented correctly. But the problem is a lot of people don't implement it correctly. And so when it's not, then it creates damage. And then talking about project-based learning or group learning models support that positive math identity when we teach math and relating math to tasks to adult learners. So helping learners to see where that connection is, as well as that conceptual understanding and allowing students to explore within math. And then last is let adult learners share their stories with their instructors. So that way that interpersonal relationship can be built within each other. That way students know that they've been heard, and then you as a teacher can better understand their math journey. So if you could write down one change that maybe you'd be interested to try in your classroom based on any of my recommendations or anything that you heard today. So this will be our last poll for you guys to participate in. So is there something that you heard today that you might think about trying in your math classroom? Oh, and I see some of you put those recommendations actually in chat. I always tell my learners to use what they do know because they already do know a lot because they have function in the world. Yes. Thank you, Katie, for sharing that. And then I don't like the word failure. It is a place to start from grow. Yes, yes. Snaps. That's big snaps to everybody for sharing that stuff to me. So listen to student stories. Yes, share stories, listen to stories, talk about feelings. Yes, capitalize on those strengths. Yes, ask them what they want to learn. Sure. Longer wait time. Yep. I mentioned at the beginning of this that I am a slow processor. I am not a speed demon. Ask for more stories. Yes. It's very interesting. Once people start sharing their stories with you, you think every time there's like some other story will pop up in the memory. When I was doing my research, people don't start at the very beginning of their life. They kind of think of a story and then they're like, oh, that reminds me of another story, or that reminds me of another story. So storytelling is great. It's a great way to share those. I love hearing about student stories. I love hearing teacher stories. If people see me on a plane or on a train, and they see me grading math, they share their stories with me about math. Normally it's, well, math was never a good thing for me, but I still appreciate those stories. I'm going to continue to collect stories. That's my primary area of focus. So if you should happen to see from your state come down at some point asking you to participate in your own personal stories, I hope that you guys may continue to contribute and talk with me. I would love to listen to anybody that has a story that they would like to share, because it's these stories that will help inform my research as we go forward. Multimedia, let students show what they know. I love these. These are great. These are all great. I knew they would be. Minnesota is a great state with great math educators. So with that, just some last minute conclusions here. That my research does talk about math as struggling and not struggling. It does support the work that's been done in the past on math identity, math motivation, math beliefs. There's work, my research also supports the research that's done on teacher development. It also goes to support the discourse on time tests and about how they can be create phobias. And that caring is a vital component in adult education. And of course, the results of this study are unique to the group of teachers that I talked to, because it's only 38. Like I said, I want to continue to grow this number. This population did lack diversity, meaning that only people that wanted to share their stories with me contacted me. So sometimes the willingness to get to the good stories are from people that maybe don't want to share. And then, of course, my closeness to the field of adult education may be a limitation of this research just because my personal story is so ingrained in this field. I did try to keep any personal biases out of my research as much as possible, but I love adult ed, so sometimes it's hard to contain that. So with that, and want you all to imagine a world where every adult learner finds that teacher who not only understands math, but understands them because they've walked a similar path. This is a world that we can create one story at a time. So thank you guys for your time today. I do have a few minutes for that I don't questions and answers. So there's an anonymous there. It says teach. Oh, so this was somebody that maybe posted here and meant to post to some other of my Slido. But if you have any questions, you can put them in chat or you can put them in the Slido. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about my research. And thank you so much. And I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brooke, for sharing not only your story, but the stories of other educators. I know that resonated a lot with the participants here today. I did see a question in the chat earlier about your research and how you determined the bots. I know AI bots have been big in social media and, just around media in general. So how did you pull those out of your research?
So normally, luckily, I mean, so this was in 2019. So AI was still very new to the world. And so the bots, you could tell them because it would be chunks of data. So I think had a total of 400 and some survey results that I had to clean down. Those normally they would repeat the same thing. And some of my questions like, what was your proudest math memory? Like maybe they would just say, no, 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 no. So all their questions were just yes or no's. They weren't stories. And so it was easy to see that they were bots. Not only that, but I used Qualtrics as my survey, and it showed me IP addresses, and a lot of the IPs were the same. So it was interesting. I asked my advisor because I was still just a fledgling researcher at that point, and she said, "Yeah, this is one of the hazards that happens when you put something out on the web and people start." So it'd be interesting now what that would look like because we have so much AI has changed and become more robust. It'd be interesting hard to detect maybe, but it was pretty easy because like I said, the answers were either yes or no to questions that required a lot more feedback. So.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to open it up again for any other questions or comments that anybody here today might have for Brooke. I'm just checking the chat too to make sure I didn't miss anything.
I appreciate everybody listening to my stories. As a math researcher, doing qualitative research can be kind of scary.
Yes, it can.
Well, that's actually my question for you as a fellow qualitative researcher, Brooke. One of the things I learned and really experienced was that qualitative research changes the researcher. Like you are changed in the experience. I wonder what's something that you now hold differently than you did before.
Yeah, so that's awesome that you would ask that. It reminded me of why I became a math teacher. So, you're a teacher. I've been teaching for 20 years now, both in adult basic ed and also at the college level. And there are times in this journey that you get downtrodden. You start to feel like maybe you aren't making a difference. And so by talking to the people in adult basic ed, it reminded me of why I do what it is I do. That why is it important to teach adults about math? Like it almost makes me emotional because of the fact that it is such a caring community and that people really do this work because they want to contribute to the world around them. And so it changed me. It reminded me of that fact. So that way I think it gave me a positive lift that I needed, and maybe that we all need. But yeah, it definitely impacted me and reminded me that I do this because I care.
That makes sense. And it's so clear from your work. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes,
I'll
thank
turn
you
it over to
guys.
Jenna.
Right, Brooke, thanks again for joining us today and sharing your research. So next, everybody, we've got just a short 10-ish minute break. We've got our next keynote starting at 9:55. So we will see you all then at 9:55. Thank you.